Conversations Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Conversations Podcast. Today we are saying hello from the beautiful Campbell's Bay, Auckland, New Zealand, in the living room of living legend Professor Ineke Crezee. And today I'll be interviewing the author of Introduction to Healthcare for Interpreters and Translators, for Turkish-speaking interpreters and translators, actually.
And I will be interviewing the author of Introduction to Healthcare for Turkish-speaking interpreters and translators.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going, Ineke?
Not too bad. How about you, Fatih?
Good, thank you. And thank you very much for opening your house to us over this last few days. It's been an amazing last few days for me. Thank you.
Same here. Absolutely amazing. And I have to say, and I don't mean to offend anyone who was involved with any of the previous books, but this has to be the best version of the book yet.
I think you're just saying that because I'm here, Ineke.
No, not at all. There's several reasons. First of all, Fatih, sitting right here next to me, spent many hours working on the glossaries. And that's, of course, is very, very important for people who want to use the book. And unfortunately, there's many glossaries. And the second author, Associate Professor Oktay Esa, came up with the idea of translating a whole lot of the questions.
Indeed, he did, yes. That was a very good idea too.
That was a very good idea, and wrote a very nice contribution on culture and the Turkish healthcare system. Very interesting. But we were also really blessed in that we had two amazing guys in Turkey, Dr. Jonathan Ross.
Yes, from Boğaziçi University. Hello, Jonathan.
And Dr. Ibrahim Dereboy.
And again from Boğaziçi University. Hello, Dr. Ibrahim. And big thanks and kudos to our co-author, Associate Professor Oktay Esa from Amasya University in Turkey.
Now, Dr. Dereboy and Dr. Ross went through all the glossaries and all the translations. And because they're teaching healthcare interpreting, they gave some really good feedback. And Dr. Dereboy is actually a medical doctor.
Dr. Dereboy is a medical doctor, so checking on all the glossaries and the questions, making sure, we're all getting it right.
Yeah. And then to cap that all off, they also wrote an amazing foreword, because there's some interesting cultural expressions, isn't there?
Oh, indeed. We for in English, there are two words for separate words for lungs and liver, for example.
Yeah.
And for us, it's the one word. We call them both ciğer, but one is called white ciğer, so maybe like white liver, we can say, and the other one's called black liver, so karaciğer, akciğer. So, and just depends on the context, that could mean one or the other.
And if your liver hurts or you are complaining about your liver, that may not mean that at all.
Indeed, you could be really in pain emotionally and you can say my liver is burning, but that could mean that maybe you're just going through some rough times and not necessarily your liver physically in pain.
And imagine then going to the doctor and saying your liver is burning. The poor doctor's going to order all of these specific tests for the liver.
Indeed.
Maybe for heartburn as well.
Maybe all you need is a good night out with some friends and, talking about your problems with your loved one.
So, it's an amazing book. And it's got quite a few pages. Now, tell me, Fatih, how did you first find out about the book? This is before our paths crossed.
I mean, yes, I didn't know you until a few years ago. And I actually met you for the first time in person just a few days ago. And it's been amazing. But it's been feeling like I've known you this whole time, because we've been always catching up about the book and other things over Zoom and other online platforms. But I was doing my master's in interpreting and translating at RMIT University. And my lecturers there, I think it was Dr. Erika Gonzalez and Dr. Miranda Lai, they said, this is the book for healthcare interpreters and go and check it out in the library. So I went to the library, I downloaded it, I printed it out, maybe, sorry. But, a student, didn't have a lot of money back then. And it became my Bible. And I always used to say to everyone, this is the interpreter's Bible in healthcare settings. And I think I've done so much work on healthcare interpreting since. And I worked at one of the major hospitals in Melbourne as well as a healthcare interpreter, an in-house interpreter. And I have to say, your book was always by my side every day, and it was one of the reasons I think why I'd like to think, so good at healthcare interpreting.
Fantastic.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So tell me, how did this book come to be? I mean, I know that it was first published in 2013 originally.
Yeah, that's correct.
But then there's like quite a big story behind it.
Yeah, there's a real story behind that as well.
So tell me, what was the reason why you wrote this book? How did you write it? And I think there's a little bit of self-publishing involved there as well.
Yes, absolutely. And taking on a loan on top of a mortgage. Do you want me to close that window?
No. Look,
Okay.
We are recording here.
We are live, so...
Live at Ineke's living room. So there's
Yeah.
some works going along here, some lawn mowing.
Yeah.
Buses might be coming and going, but I think we'll just leave it as
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, it's actually a very interesting story. You probably know that my background is a little bit varied. So I'm a linguist. I've always loved different languages, always loved communicating with people in other languages. And I'm also a registered nurse. I came to New Zealand in 1989, and 1990 took the very first healthcare interpreting course here in New Zealand.
So you were teaching it? Or
I
you
was
were...
taking it as a student.
As a student,
And
yeah.
I hope nobody minds after all these years, I actually did not like the way the healthcare interpreting part was taught. It wasn't what I felt that we needed. So I actually took over the teaching that part in 1991, and I thought, great, now I can just do it my way. And what I felt I needed to do for the students was to teach them how the body works, how it's put together, how it works, and what can go wrong. Because learning terminology is like learning lots and lots of words out of context. What is the point of that?
Not really going to make sense to you when you're trying to memorize everything, and you might get it wrong and you might not remember it.
That's right. And from the very first, we also had lots of students who were from Pacific Island nations, and so they spoke Polynesian languages. And Polynesian languages still do not have a lot of medical terminology. And we also had students who had grown up in refugee camps. And so all these people needed to actually be able to unpack the words because they understood what they meant. And in order to do that, they really needed to have a good basic understanding of anatomy, physiology, and pathology. So I started teaching it like that. And fast forward to 1995, I know that's still a long time ago, and I was teaching for the very first interpreting and translation service here in New Zealand, and that's at Middlemore Hospital, which is a big, very ethnically, culturally diverse hospital in South Auckland. And I had advertised, I got 60 people sign up, and one of them was a young Vietnamese woman who'd been working as an interpreter. And after class one day, she came up to me and she said, Ineke, what sort of book can I buy to really help me with my interpreting? And I gave her a title. She checked it out, came back the next week and said, nah, it's not what I needed.
No good.
No good. So I gave her another title. Again, she went and checked that out in the bookshop and came back and said, no, it's not what I need. And I've started to feel a little bit exasperated. And I must have said with some impatience in my voice, well, what do you want? And she said, she knew exactly what she wanted. She said, well, when we get called up, we get called and they say, okay, I want you to be cardiology at 9. I want you to be at endocrinology at 3. But she says, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me prepare. So what I would like is a book that has cardiology, endocrinology, and then it explains, okay, for cardiology, this is the heart. How is it put together? What are the parts called? What is the function of the heart? What are the things that can go wrong? In alphabetical order, all the disorders, common disorders of the heart, and what treatments and diagnostic studies will doctors suggest? And then at the end, a list of words. And I thought, oh, shoot, that doesn't exist. And then my next thought,
No, it doesn't.
well, then the next few seconds was, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to write that book myself.
Had you written any books before then, or is this your first book?
well, I'd written a couple of master's theses, and they'd gone pretty well. And I'd had a very good teacher at school for Dutch. He taught me how to write essays. So I knew that structure is very important. So I started by writing the structure of the book, and then I kept every chapter in part 2, which is the different body systems. I kept every chapter the same because I thought people want to know where they're at. It has to be predictable. It has to follow the same pattern, and then it's also easy for me to write. Now, as it happened, I was working as a registered nurse for Southern Cross Healthcare Line, which is a big insurance company. And that's a very special line where people ring up and they'll say, oh, the doctor's just told me I'm going to need a hystero O4O salpingectomy. What does that mean? Or I've got acoustic neuroma. What does that mean? What are the treatment options? And then we had all these computer programs, and we could look it up and sound like we knew all that stuff. That was really helpful because I had access to a whole lot of up-to-date information from the United States, which was really good. And so I also at home had 2 small boys. One was 1, one was 3.
Not so small, I met them.
Not so small anymore. And those boys, you know, I'm a mum, and I love reading books to little kids. So I would always read them a couple of stories at night. 8 o'clock, I'd switch the light off. I'd say last story was usually the 5th one. And then I would go into my office and I'd work on the book. And I did that for 2 years.
2 years? That's actually quite
From
a
8
short
to 11,
time, isn't it? Because
8
you're
to
working
11 at night. Yeah.
You're working full time all day, and then
Yeah.
you come home and then you're mothering,
Yeah.
making the dinner. You've got a wonderful husband as well, whom I met, Paul.
Yes.
Wasn't he helping you out at night?
Absolutely, yeah.
No? Yep, very good. And then put the kids to bed. 8 o'clock, you start writing the book.
8 to 11 every night.
And 2 years. I mean, it's quite a comprehensive book. How many pages do we have here?
Well, that book's bigger than the previous versions.
400 plus pages.
Yeah.
So look, well done to you for getting this done in a couple of years. And then
what happened? Then I got a student in the class, was a printer, and he said, I'll print you 200 copies. And he printed me 200 copies. And they sold like hotcakes. I was really surprised.
Where are you selling? Just in New Zealand? In Auckland?
New Zealand, in Auckland.
Yeah.
Interpreters. They just sold. And some people who were not interpreters bought the book as well. And then I needed to print more. And I have a good friend in Taiwan. She said, okay, I can help you with that. She found the printer. The printer in Taiwan charged much less. It charged 1/3 of the price of the New Zealand printers for a very nice job.
So this is still in the 90s, yeah?
Still in the 90s. Yeah. So he printed 2,000 copies. My friend put them in boxes and got them onto a ship. I still feel terribly indebted to her. She's a very nice lady.
We'll say
thank you, Lee. Lee Chen.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, in Taipei. Thank you so much. Was just, I mean, without you, that would not have happened. And that was actually big because I then went to conferences, and because I started working at Auckland University of Technology, where I'm still working, and I was able to go to conferences overseas, and I'd take a couple of copies of the book, and they went like hotcakes.
So at this time, you're like a traveling salesman. You're
yes.
just going around and selling your own book.
And I'm not good at selling. So I can sell other people's stuff well, but not my own. That's the downside. So anyway, roll on a few years. I'd become involved in another book that was published by the New Zealand government, by Language Line. And I'd sent that to a friend of mine, Aldous Ozelens. Shout out to you, Aldous.
Hi, Aldous.
In Melbourne, Australia. And he was going to do a course with the very well-known, wonderful Professor Sandra Hale for...
Hello, Sandra. We're dropping all these names.
Muchas gracias.
Hi, Sandra.
And so Sandra and all this were going to do this course for migrant women. And they needed, and it was going to be non-language specific, which, you know, in Australia, most of the teaching is still very much language specific.
Yep.
And so I'd sent the book to Aldous more to fill up the parcel than for any other reason. And he emailed me and he said, Ineke, this is a fantastic book. How come we never knew about this? Can we order 40 copies? Do you still have 40 copies? And I had boxes and boxes. So I sent 40 copies to Aldous.
Do you still have the old copies somewhere? Or
yeah, I do have an old copy.
Because Good to see one of those.
Yeah, I've got one in there. I had to destroy them all when the new book was published,
yes, of course.
but I've got one left just as a souvenir. And so the fact that Aldous and Sandra really liked the book was a massive, gave me so much confidence. And I thought, oh my goodness, it really needs updating, because the field of medicine is just advancing so quickly all the time. And so I thought, I can't do all that again. I can't have it all printed and put in boxes and put on a boat and, all that sort of stuff. I can't market it myself. So I'm going to have to find a publisher. So I decided to contact John Benjamin's in Amsterdam, and I emailed them. Emailed a lady called Isha Conan, who's still our editor.
Still our editor.
Yeah,
Thank you, Isha.
Yep. And Isha said, oh, it looks very interesting. And she told me later, textbook type books are what really sells. And they hold their value as well, because as you said, people use them. It's
Correct,
their go-to, their vade-mecum, if you like. And so she said, can you send me a PDF? So I stuck all the chapters together, because I had them all as separate chapters, sent it to her as a PDF, and she responded the same day. And what she wrote was this: thank you for offering to publish with us. And I thought, my goodness, it's supposed to be really difficult to get a book published with John Benjamin's. You have to write a proposal first, and you have to go through all these, and then it has to go to a committee.
Major publishing company, international.
They're fantastic. Yeah. They're very prestigious. So I just kept pinching myself. And then 2013, the first copy, the non-language specific version, came out, and brought that to friends in America, and they said, why don't we have a Spanish version? Because we have a lot of interpreters here working with Spanish.
Correct.
And so then with Holly Mickelson and Laura Monzon's story, she did all the glossaries. We published the second version, which was the Spanish version. And after that, we got the Chinese version, where some really good translators did all the glossaries. We had the Japanese version. Again, it was a very lovely collaboration with Professor Teruko Asano in Japan and some of her colleagues. And then we had Russian and even Korean. Korean was...
Arabic, you have?
Arabic, yeah. And then Russian, that was published in 2021. And then, at some point, use your story to take up here.
Yeah, so I was just finishing off my master's at RMIT University, and I said to Miranda, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a Turkish version of this? And I was just making conversation with Miranda. I didn't expect her to give you a call and say, hey, I've got this student and he's interested in a Turkish version of your book. And, the rest is history. So Miranda got us together. Yeah. I remember our first Zoom chat. Oktay was there as well. And I had no idea that this would actually eventuate and, roll forward time a couple of years, and here it is now.
Yeah,
so,
it's fantastic. It's an absolutely wonderful book.
You were saying that you keep making updates to it. So this most recent one, I think, is got a chapter in it on COVID-19 as well.
Well, COVID-19 is in the respiratory medicine chapter. Yeah.
So that's in there. So that's it's just proof.
And that's tricky, of course, because I think doctors have got really good at treating people with COVID-19. Of course, initially, So again, that field is also progressing.
That's right. Now, within regards to interpreting, how did that come to be? I mean, you're from the Netherlands.
Yeah, that's right.
You grew up in Amsterdam, is it?
No, all over.
All over?
Yeah.
Your dad was, you were telling me, a policeman.
He was a police officer.
So he was travelling the country pretty much, right?
Yeah, he was, he had different placements.
So how did you become an interpreter? Were you a nurse before you were an interpreter?
No. My mother was a nurse, and she was an amazing lady, and she was very, very knowledgeable. So she had lots of books, medical books, books on pharmacology. And I wanted to become a nurse because she's a very wise lady. And
you loved your mother, so you wanted to follow in her footsteps, right?
Still love my mum.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. But I was actually a very good student in languages, and I had the good luck great good fortune of going to a school which is called a Gymnasium in German. German speakers will know what I'm talking about. It's nothing to do with sports.
It's not a sports school, is
not
it?
Not at all.
Maybe
no,
sports of the brain, academics.
Yes, right. Yes, academic gymnastics. So you start with a whole lot of different subjects, very broad, and then you narrow it down. And I chose to become what they call an alpha. You have alphas and betas. Betas are the scientists, and the alphas are the real linguistic, social science, humanities people. So I chose Latin and Greek. Dropped German, sorry.
Nein,
ja, aber ich habe das doch gemacht. And still had French and so Latin, Greek, English, French, history, and mathematics. Yeah, and so I actually topped the school that year in terms of my grades, which were really good because I was doing things that I enjoyed, and things always go well when you do things you enjoy. And after that, Mum said to me, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "A nurse." And she said, "No way, you are so gifted academically." And she said, "What else?" And I said, "Oh, maybe archaeology, or oh yeah, I'd like to be an interpreter actually, because then you can use all your languages." And so we did a little bit of research, which is all pre-internet, of course. And
how old are you when this is happening?
I was going on 18. 17. Yeah, just last month of being 17, and then we found that, yes, you could study interpreting in Brussels, I think in Antwerp, and in Switzerland. But my parents didn't have an awful lot of money. But they also found that you could study translation studies at the University of Amsterdam. So that's where I went. So translation and interpreting, they seem very similar. But actually, after 4 years of studying translation studies and translating a whole novel by myself, and some other work, some other literary work with some classmates, and being paid for that was really good actually. I found that it's actually quite lonely. You have to be at home, you have to be focused on your book. And yeah, so then I studied English. I did a BA English Language and Literature.
What was the book that you translated, do you remember?
Oh yes, The Ivory Dagger by Patricia Wentworth.
And from English into
Dutch, yeah. And so it was actually very interesting, and I'm still using what I learned as a student when I teach my own students at Auckland University of Technology. Because I remember there was a young guy called Bill, I think his name was, and he woke up in a hospital and he had a bandage around his head and he looked around the curtain. So I wrote in Dutch, I typed on an old Remington typewriter, he looked around the curtain. And then I started thinking, did we say this in Dutch? Does that sound natural in Dutch? So I thought, oh dear, I can't think of it now, I'm too stressed. So I decided to make a whole schedule, do the book in 3.5 months, 250 pages, I think it was. And then just wait a week, so do, say, page 1 to 7, and then a week later, proofread them as if someone else had translated them. And then you can actually see whether something sounds natural or not. And at some point, Bill must have been very upset because he said something like, "Excuse me now, there's going to be rough language." He said, "Bloody hell." And so I wrote in Dutch, "Bloederige hell." And then I thought, no, we don't say that. No, we don't say that. So it must be something like potverdomme or, something like that. So yeah, you learn a lot. And I had some really nice lectures, some really nice classmates. But yeah, after that I did English Language and Literature. I raced through that. I took so many other electives that I think I broke the record at that time for the person with the most electives in a minor, in a BA. And then I had barely got the BA parchment. Then I was in a hospital and doing the in-service training to be a registered nurse. And that was in the St. Lucas Hospital in Amsterdam, which is now called OLVG West. So it's got a totally different name. And it was just amazing. I have to say, best thing I've ever done. It was really hard work. You had to do like 10 days on, 2 days off. That's really tough. And then the shift work, the night shifts. But the people I worked with were just so collegial. And you learn on the job. So you get classes, but then you see a person with cirrhosis of the liver, for instance. And so you see what happens. And you read about how that actually came about, and then what you have to do when there's a crisis. And there was so many people with leukemia, with lung cancer, with strokes, with diabetes. And so it's so interesting.
So what brought you out to New Zealand? I mean,
Yeah, after finishing a master's in English and a master's...
I know, you know, the Dutch came
Paul
out here a few hundred years ago.
Yeah.
And you know, said
Abel
hi.
Tasman, yes.
Okay, the Abel Tasman. What brings this Dutch person out?
Okay, then I met my now husband, Paul. And at the time I was finishing Masters of English, Masters of Translation Studies. And that was only because I started doing nursing text translations. So Canadian nursing journals, American ones, British ones, into Dutch for publication in a Dutch nursing journal. And the editor said to me, why don't you have a master's degree? And I thought, oh shoot, not more studies. So that's why I finished those 2 degrees. And then met Paul, and Paul didn't like it in the Netherlands. I mean, he liked some bits, but they didn't recognize any of his training.
But Paul was originally from
New Zealand, but
right?
from Dutch-speaking parents. Yeah. So he was fluent in Dutch.
So he was a bit homesick.
He was a bit homesick. I think that's what it came down to. Yeah. And so he said, okay, let's go to New Zealand. But he says, let's travel first. Let's do some backpacking. So we backpacked through Asia for 9 months. We taught English in Hong Kong for 2 months. And then arrived in New Zealand, and of course I didn't have my nursing registration, so that was very difficult.
This is in the 80s now?
This is in 89. By 1990 I had my nursing registration, and I was working as a nurse. And
so in New Zealand you were working as a nurse as well?
Yeah, and doing that first health interpreting course. By 91 I was teaching it.
Wow.
And still working as a nurse.
Look, I know you are a very prolific author, a very prolific academic. You're New Zealand's first and only full professor of interpreting and translating so far. I mean, hopefully many more follow in your footsteps.
Right.
How do you balance it all? I mean, I've got to know you a little bit now personally as well. You're a very, very busy woman. You're teaching, you're still practicing as an interpreter, translator as well. Yeah. You've got a beautiful dog by the name of Frank.
Yes.
You're always publishing something. You're the editor of a International Translators.
Well, I'm co-editor.
Co-editing.
Yeah, Associate Professor Mustafa Taibi.
Mustafa.
Merhaba. He's the editor-in-chief. And
a lot going on. How do you balance it? And how do you keep sane in between all of this?
Well, Paul helps me keep sane.
Yep.
So that's a big shout out to Paul. And that's what he does for a job.
Paul's very calm and cool. I've seen him.
Yeah, he's very chill, and he counsels people. So he works as a DEPANS practitioner. So he's always believed in work-life balance. So he makes sure now that I don't work past 6 o'clock at night. I do not touch a computer after 6 o'clock at night. So he makes me sit down and watch Netflix or do some painting or whatever. And he also got me to start running many years ago, because he said, you're just sitting on your bottom too much, doing all this academic stuff. You haven't got any balance. I think I was doing my PhD at the time. So I became a recreational runner. I'm still very grateful to him because I'm not very good at sports, but you know, that's something I can still do. I think making to-do lists, I think I have a slight touch of ADHD, as you've probably noticed. So with that, it's very important that you don't get distracted, but it's very easy to get distracted. So what I do is I set a timer for 25 minutes, because research has shown actually that 25 minutes is probably the maximum amount of time that you can go in one go and focus on something. And then you just need to get up 5-10 minutes and do something else. And I tried that out when I wrote 2 master's theses in 6 months. The second one I wrote in only 3 months, and I used that system. It worked really well. So just make a to-do list. This is what I'm going to do from then to then. I'm going to put in 25 minutes, then I'm going to have a break. If I want to do a bit more work on that, I'm going to do another 25 minutes. But hey, I've got this other article I'm working on. So after my next break, I'm going to do 25 minutes on that. And that works really well for me, actually. That and walking, playing with Frank.
I mean,
And-
you've got a beautiful house here.
Aye.
You're overlooking the ocean.
Yeah,
I mean, just
that is really gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah.
it is amazing. And it's been raining for the last few days, so we are very lucky to have
The sun's come out.
a bit of sunshine.
Yes.
And I go back to Australia today, so the sun's come out to say goodbye
Yeah.
to me. And it's just, we've gone for walks around here. It's just lovely. It's very inviting. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you were to sit on your bum all day today here, you're looking at this, just gets you out, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really beautiful.
So what is it that you like about Auckland, apart from this amazing view here? What keeps you here? What is...
I think it's a cosmopolitan city, but a small one. And I remember my professor when I was doing my Master of English, Mike Hannay, another shout out to Mike. He said that's probably the only city in New Zealand you could live in. Okay, he says the rest are just too small. It's probably not enough for you to keep you busy, keep you occupied. So yeah, Auckland ticks the boxes for me. I think at some stage I'll probably be moving just a little distance outside of Auckland and have a few maybe chickens. And some
nice.
more
Yeah.
fruit trees. I've got a couple of fruit trees, but yeah,
Bit more room for Frank to run around.
Yeah, absolutely, with Frank in mind. Yeah, that sounds a bit odd for people who don't like dogs, but he's a sheep herding dog.
Frank's amazing.
Yeah.
I was going to have Frank here today, but Frank's gone to the swimming pool.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
Frank,
the doggy.
Frank would have been here.
Yeah, it's probably finished now. Oh, I have to go and pick him up.
You have to go and pick him up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing talking to you.
Same here, Fatih.
Looking forward to the next time.
Yes,
Hopefully we can have you over in 2023 perhaps sometime.
I would absolutely love that.
Thank you very much.
Let's see. I like Melbourne, so I've got a lot of friends there.
And Melbourne loves you, so come and say
Oh.
hello anytime you like. Who knows, we might even go to Turkey together and say hello to Oktay Hoca.
Yeah, let's
And
go
the
to
three of us
Amasya, which is
three
an
of us can
amazing
get
city.
together and talk about the book
Yeah.
there as well.
Yeah.
Any recommendations to healthcare interpreters out there? What do they do? What should they do?
Practice as much as possible. On TV, see if you can find one of those programs like Paramedics, 24 Hours in Emergency, even if it's a soap opera, and just try and interpret. Definitely get one of these books. There's so many to choose from, because that'll really, really help you, because you really can't interpret if you can't anticipate what's going to happen. And the good thing about health interpreting is you can actually anticipate.
That's one of the most important things I found when you know the context.
Yeah.
Let's say it's cardiovascular
Yeah.
problem. You know the anatomy. You know what the problems are. You pretty much know what the treatments are, and then it's just about anticipation of what the doctor's going to say, what the patient is going to say.
Exactly, yeah.
And after you've done a few of these assignments,
Yeah.
it just really, really makes it a lot easier
Yeah.
when you know what you're interpreting about, and then you're not so heavily relying on your short-term memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it makes perfect sense to, and it's not just healthcare, is it? You really need to know what you're interpreting about before interpreting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So interpreters need really good general knowledge, and they need to be readers and watchers and listeners.
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
we really need to be analytical thinkers
Yeah.
and not just watching everyday television.
Managing
but
the interaction.
managing interaction,
Yeah.
correct. But the way I became an interpreter, I was always, whenever I would see a sign even, always interpreting.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
that I would see.
Oh,
written,
how do I
just
say that in
always-
Dutch? Yeah.
Always interpreting. And it just became like this annoying thing that happened in the back of my
Yeah.
head. Still happens. And then
Yeah.
I was like, what do I do with this? And then I
found this
I need
profession.
to go and do interpreting and translation. So I think just that's what practitioners are always doing in their head anyway. And then just backing that up with knowledge of context, whatever you're interpreting.
Absolutely, that
just
thematic
makes-
knowledge is so
yeah.
important.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you very much. And I'll have to chat to you again sometime
Yeah.
soon, maybe when you're in Melbourne.
Absolutely. Çok teşekkürler.
Dank u wel.
Graag gedaan.
Thanks very much. Today I was with Ineke Crezee in Campbell's Bay, Auckland, New Zealand, and we had a little bit of a chat about our new book, Introduction to Healthcare for Turkish-Speaking Interpreters and Translators. like we said, the book is available in 7 other languages, but it's also available just in English as well,
That's right,
as in
yeah.
non-language specific. I mean, this book is in English too, but it has chapters on
Yeah.
Turkish healthcare system and the insurance system. But all the language specific books have glossaries in those
Yeah.
languages.
Like that.
Yep, and we've also done those doctor to patient questions
Yeah.
that are translated as well. So, look, you can get it from John Benjamin's.
Nice images.
Lots of nice images
Yeah.
with legends, very good. We'll put a link in the description. I'll put the link for all the languages there as well, so people can have a click
Yeah.
and
The
see what they
Korean
think.
one may be
Yeah.
less easy to find, unless you know Korean, you can find it. So, yeah, but we'll do that.
But we'll put all
Yeah.
the links in the description there. All right, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.